Welcome to Learning Life Skills Together. This is our weekly community Zoom meeting where our guests help us to go deeper into the 4 life skills and open up a huge array of chances to practice them. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Zoom meeting number 34 with Mike Blanche. And as always, we'll start with practice. We'll get ourselves present, and we're going to talk a lot about being present today. So, if you'd like, this is a really simple practice that you can do anytime, anywhere, in the line, at the Acme, So just getting in touch with your body right where you are. Maybe your feet are on the floor and you could feel your feet on the floor. Maybe you're standing and you feel that sense of being vertical. Maybe you're sitting down and you feel the seat supporting you. Actually, what's happening there is gravity is holding you to your seat. So maybe you can feel your way into that. What if gravity was doing the work? What if gravity had hold of you? Which is true. How much work would you need to be doing right now? How much effort needs to go into your body in this moment? Maybe you have a little extra effort that you could let go of. And just be here. Just fully feeling your body where it is. Noticing what it's like around you. The temperature of the air. The sounds. Just aware of what's here. And so maybe you've been doing this with your eyes closed. Maybe they've been open. Either way, you could come into our conversation now, just knowing a little bit about how you are and knowing that maybe you're a little more present than you were before. And so, since this is recorded and I can't ask our listeners, I'm going to ask our guest, Mike, how was this for you?
It was really gentle. It was a nice introduction. Good job. Yeah.
Okay. And so we are present here together. So we'll start from there. So I'm going to ask Mike to introduce himself and what he sort of does in the big world, and then a little more specifically, I want to ask him about our topic for tonight, which is essentially digital wellness. So maybe there's a sense of how you are in the world led you in some way to thinking about digital wellness.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for putting this all together. My name is Mike Blanche. I'm the co-founder of Ethos Treatment. Ethos Treatment is an independent, small, intensive outpatient services. We're licensed mental health and substance use disorder, where we have programs at 7 locations in and around Philadelphia region, especially where we launched is right here in Westchester. And we have telehealth options as well. And I've been in direct clinical care for those individuals and families and parents that struggle with substance use disorder, mental health. In the last 10, 15 years, I've been asked many, many times to talk around tech addiction, or more importantly, mindfulness relationship with technology, as it's already here. Technology is already present in our worlds. It's raising a consciousness awareness around how we interact with it, as it can lead to a lot of different challenges. And we treat gambling addiction, we treat process addictions, and we treat end stage or use patterns that are unhealthy. But I'm always grateful to have an opportunity to get ahead of those kind of problems,
Yes.
and to talk to families that are interested to hear, what are some of the challenges that I've seen over the years of treatment, as well as just care in adolescent care and young adult care with technology.
Yeah. So we're talking about people now who are growing up with these devices in their hands.
So
Yeah.
we are digital immigrants to this world. These kids today are digital natives, not only digital natives, but social media natives. So it's not uncommon for 9, 10-year-olds to have their own social media. It's not uncommon and normal to have their own social media. And that, for me, questions, and what we were talking about earlier today was this idea, this concept that all this technology isn't bad. It's just how we've related to it and how we've let it kind of take off under our feet without an accurate conversation.
Yeah, that for me is a big part of it is that we never really discussed it. We're just here with this. And since we didn't discuss it before, we should be discussing it now and maybe making some decisions for ourselves, for our families, for our kids. So, you know, learning life skills together has these four life skills, all of which, relate in some way or other to the use of digital devices. We can see how they either support the skill or undermine the skill.
Sure, sure,
So,
sure.
yeah. So I'd kind of propose that today we just go through those four skills and talk about, the two sides
Sure,
of the coin there
sure,
with
sure,
each
sure.
one. So the first one being paying attention to what's around you and how it affects you inside. So,
Sure.
knowing your world and knowing how your world is registering right in your body,
Sure, sure, sure.
your feelings. Yeah.
Well, I ask people and parents and adults at any age, really, like, how do they start their day, and what do they embrace as the first thing they grab at the beginning of the day? And if it is their technology device, if it is their phone, like, are you inviting hundreds and thousands of messaging into your world before you even get out of bed? And so, and what is the last thing people do before they go to sleep? What's the last thing they do to settle their mind, to settle their heart, to settle their world? And is it to mindlessly scroll? And is it to not
Mm.
really pay attention to what they're ingesting and what they're kind of seeing online? And that's my only concern when it comes to the mindfulness piece, and that, awareness of our world and ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's this question of what is it like for you when you've been scrolling for 2 hours?
The common thread that I hear
Yeah.
from people is, I wish I got that 2 hours back. And so, what did you really get from those 2 hours? What did you really see? And is it creating some case of FOMO? Kids call this thing called FOMO, fear of missing out. So they'll see an activity, an event that's represented on a social media event as something that they were supposed to attend, or something they missed out on. And it's funny that so many people have that sense of urgency and anxiety that they have to keep up. We used to be up against the myth of that party. You remember, as a kid growing up, you heard about that party that happened last weekend.
Mm.
Now we're up against that perfect image of that party that took place minutes, moments right afterwards, that adolescent may have not been invited to, or that family may not feel invited to. And then all of a sudden they feel like, oh, I should have attended. And that guilt, or that remorse
Mm.
about missing something. So again,
Yeah.
like, what are they seeing, and what images, the image management that they have to live up to, that pressure, that anxiety.
Well, that's an interesting phrase, image management. Could you expand on that maybe a little bit?
Is social media social? or is it image management? And the idea is that, is it a competing monologue of tweets or lines or in nonverbal cues, PS, or is it a social interactive piece? And I beg to differ. I think it's probably more of a lack of depth, fragmented relationship. Jonathan Haidt wrote this book that came out this year, and he talked about one of the pieces of harm that happens in our development, and that is attention fragmentation and relational fragmentation as a result. And social media doesn't really often connect the way that it's sold that it does. And so we're not seeing somebody's eyes when we look at the screen. We're looking at a text thread. We're looking at an image, a perfect image that can be edited, that can be enhanced, and can be edited down to the right image versus in natural ways in daily life, you know, there's not a perfect image that happens. Life
Right.
happens.
Yeah. We
So
have a lot of false starts and false endings and
right.
everything else going on. Yeah.
Yes. And bumps and bruises and scrapes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Exactly. And in Jonathan Haidt's work there, the book is The Anxious Generation.
great
Right,
book. Yeah.
right. And so one of the things that he talks about is we need those bumps and those false starts and all that kind of stuff. We need them still to help us become more of who we are. And our kids really need that. So the idea of having a curated childhood,
Right.
you're talking
Right.
about 9-year-olds
Yes.
curating their life on their phone
Yes.
and making it come out perfect. This
Yes.
is this is exactly the opposite
Yes.
of what they need to be doing. So there is some problematic stuff going on there, just the opportunities to do that. So I'm I'm wondering here, we've talked about our attention and, knowing how we feel.
Mm.
And to me, that's the skill that underlies all these other skills. So, we're going to keep coming back to that, I'm sure, as we talk. But the next one is being able to regulate your emotional response.
Mm.
So again, knowing how you're feeling and then having some ways of working with yourself. So I'm wondering now how we talk about that skill, both sides of it, both sides of the digital
Sure.
world,
Sure.
how that might be helpful
Sure.
in some ways and how it might be something we want to talk a little more about. Let's put it that way.
Sure. Sure. In this case, in this part, I definitely will start with where it can be positive because nowadays, with young adults that I work with, adults that I work with that may struggle in an in-person setting, they may be able to log on a telehealth therapeutic setting or
Mm,
log on a telehealth traditional 12-step meeting or mindfulness meeting that they may have not been accessible to before. And so some individuals that struggled with the anxiety of attending or going or reaching out for help, and now they feel it's a little bit more at ease to text a thread or reach out in that respect. I had a client recently that I worked with that she journaled, and in preparation for her session, she sent the journal to me, through
mm,
through the email, through a secure email, and it was I was able to read it prior to the session in preparation, and what she was able to do is in a digital format, being able to create a safe space for her to cultivate, to create a sense of awareness through that device. So,
yeah.
people find communities, people find alternative communities, people find ways to connect, to feel supportive of whatever endeavors they're in, and in anonymous ways. Or I'll send links to TED Talks for Brene Brown's work on vulnerability every day. I'll send links to books in anonymous ways versus I would ask a parent 20 years ago when I first started working in the field to go to a local Barnes and Noble bookstore
Right.
and
Yeah.
buy a book called Under the Influence, and they would be afraid that the neighbor would be ringing them out. But
Mm,
now they can anonymously tap into a resource that
yeah.
I think helps with emotional regulation skills if they're researching and live action understanding about themselves or their world. So it doesn't have to be all bad. That's my message
Right.
today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I
So
mean, I notice that I use my digital devices a lot.
yep, yep, yep. It's how we use them. It's
Yes,
how,
exactly.
and I have my device out here as my
Yeah.
notes that I'll reflect on at some point
Yeah.
for sure. But where emotional regulation, I get a little worried is if this device is the only device that they look toward, this the cell phone or computer, that they look to, that's the only way they know how to emotionally regulate.
Mm.
So I call this, have you ever noticed the Starbucks line or waiting in line somewhere? You won't see anybody talk to each other or make eye contact. You'll see everybody just take out their phones and use this device to manage their patience. And what is
Right.
that sending to a message to kids is they don't know how to tolerate patience. Parents don't know how to tolerate patience. So I don't know. So I see how they do it. They take out their phones, they look at their phones. And
Yeah.
that's where it gets a little concerning for me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to think about all the opportunities that we miss. This is something that comes up a lot because, I teach at a college. I don't know, 10 years ago, I would walk into class and I'd have to tell everybody, okay, that's enough.
Right,
Let's
right, right, right.
let's start class. And now it's just absolute silence as
Yes.
people. 36 students
Yes.
sitting there looking at their screens. So there's something going on or something not going on. I think that does become a problem. I maybe I'm just sentimental, but
No,
I met my wife at college in a classroom.
there you go.
you
There
know,
you go.
I
Right,
mean,
right, right, right.
yeah, and so we were both English majors. We had all this stuff in common, and and off we went. And it's important to be on the spot, to be anxious, to be nervous, but still to continue. I mean, getting back to our initial point here, of false starts, with false endings, all this kind of stuff that we need to go through to develop more, and
Sure.
that we can miss out on if all we're doing is living
Perfect.
that life on our device.
Yeah. And a lot of subtleties, a lot of nuances happen in those awkward moments that I don't know if this perfect technology
Mm,
world is offering. And
yeah.
these anxious moments, we all need to learn how to manage those anxious moments. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. To have someone next to you physically is
mm,
really helpful. And so, talking to our parents here in learning life skills together, it is so important to when the child needs to be regulated, be with them, pick them up, the little tiny ones, pick them up, hold them close to you. You can't do that.
no, no,
That can't be mediated. That can only happen
sure,
in the real world. And
sure,
so if we think of, as you were saying, all of the possibilities of that, all of those subtle things that having human relationships,
sure. Well,
really give us.
UCLA came out with a study in the 80s, and it was like 80, I was 94. 87% of communication is nonverbal. So it's tonality, it's body posturing, it's breadth and depth of how I say. And I look at you in the eyes and I see oxytocin goes released in my body when I
Yeah.
see somebody's eyes. And that's how I self-regulate. In group setting or in therapeutic setting, when I see somebody's eyes and they look back at me and they're paying attention and not on their device. And so I'm speaking to parents to capture those moments, to not miss those subtle opportunities. And I look at my 5-year-old and I challenge my 5-year-old to say, now look at me in my eyes when I tell you this. And that extra step of him putting down, even if it was toys and something fun, for him to look at me in his eyes is
Mm.
such more powerful event of
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah.
So, so when it
Um,
comes to emotional regulation skills, I think the nonverbals, the tonality, and hearing things. I think we can send audio messages. We can send video
Sure.
clips. And again, that could be a nice compliment. And telehealth is a real thing and an amazing thing. But I think that in-person connection with families are so important.
Our voices carry so much information. I mean, yes, there is that nonverbal, but there's so much nonverbal in the verbal as
Right, right,
well,
right, right,
right?
right.
So when you look at something like telehealth,
Mhm.
there's really a much deeper connection than it sounds
Yes.
because of that.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's see. We've talked about attention and emotion regulation. And so those are linked. And the next one is linked as well. And that is being able to be with ourselves in those situations that we didn't choose, don't care for, and are not going to get out of very fast.
Sure.
The technical term is distress tolerance,
Right, right, right.
but really, it's like I don't want to be here,
Sure.
and I got another 2 hours. What do I? How do I handle this?
Sure, sure, sure.
That's it.
And even that in the moment, I used to give out this button. You remember the buttons? It would be these big red buttons, and it would be a pause button.
Mm-hmm.
And just taking a pause button. And folks that I work with substance abuse or mental health issues that have high impulsivity issues, that also is a distress tolerance place where impulsivity can really get them in trouble.
Yeah.
And so, not using this device, but having a way to pause when agitated or doubtful. And what do I mean by that? I mean, if you're ambiguous about where to move, if you're not certain how the next hour is going to play out, or you don't know the true ending of how things are going to go, take a pause button and not let fear override to react. And or if you're agitated, angry, and you're upset, you don't want to jump to a conclusion or jump to a fact without checking with another person and checking with yourself and checking with your body posture, as opposed to checking with this device. So when it comes to, how do we connect with self? How do we connect with others? When it comes to distress tolerance, my hope is that we don't turn to these devices to self kind of regulate or to really kind of distract from that event. Typically, it happens. It does happen, and I'm not opposed to it in periodic events. But we really want to fine tune those abilities to kind of manage the uncomfortability. And when
Yeah.
we grow that
the,
layer of ability to
this is
manage,
it, and this is how we talk about it in learning life skills together, is that we're toggling back and forth.
sure,
We can distract ourselves for get a breath,
sure, sure,
like, okay, I've had enough of trying to get through this. I'm gonna distract myself. I'm gonna, whatever for 5 minutes, and then I'll come back.
yeah,
And as long as we're coming back, it's working for us. We're getting somewhere.
correct,
It's when we make the choice to I'm just going to doom scroll for an hour and a half until I can get out of here. That's, not working with that distress
correct,
tolerance
correct.
piece.
And you said a word without saying it, and I'll use the word intentionality.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that intentional, like I'm going to put a limit and I'm going to say I'm going to be on this device for 10 minutes or 15, whatever it is. And that limiting that exposure so that I can self-regulate to come back to whatever is stressful, to come
Yeah.
back to whatever I have to address. Perspective is really important. Having some understanding about how we need to step away from a situation to get some perspective. However, if we're mindlessly walking away from it and drifting from the truth or drifting from what needs to be addressed, that's where people get into trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's,
intentionality was a great word. What
yeah.
you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, so in some sense, the digital device can be helpful if we make the right decisions around it. It can distract us for 10 minutes and we can come back and move on. And it's also kind of a trap
Yes.
and I'm interested in this concept of drifting too that you brought in there. So you're saying that we have a tendency to just drift, And I've noticed that in myself. I'm just going to watch this for 5 minutes here, and the next thing I know, I'm down
A
a
spiral.
spiral, and yeah, it's not 5 minutes anymore. And is that what you mean by drifting, or
A
what
hundred
did you
percent.
have in
Well,
mind?
well, that's
Yeah.
that's it exactly. So there's two elements that we're up against. One is the technological world, the algorithms behind the algorithms. I don't know if you ever remember the history of YouTube, an amazing channel, an amazing resource. And in 2007, when it first came out, nobody knew what to really do with it. It was just this nice place that you can post videos and everything else. And then all of a sudden, 2008, 2009, they did this nice thing where they said, well, if you like this video about cats, you'll definitely like this video about cats. And they started suggesting, and they started identifying what videos you were watching. And to be so supportive of your video content, they wanted to reward you by watching the next thing that could go along with what you're watching. And again, that all sounds nice. The New York Times did this amazing six-part series called The Rabbit Hole. And it's one thing when we're talking about cat videos or anything else. It's another thing if we're talking about politics or emotionality, and we go down and mental health and these rabbit holes that people get caught up in. And again, TikTok and the thing on Instagram, the reels of
Reels.
Instagram
Yeah.
took all that technology and all that decades of research and then implemented it right away so that when you log into TikTok, you have thousands and thousands of researched hours of people's participation with these things. So you're already up against an algorithm, is what my point is.
Mm.
And their goal is to get you to watch more longer, to stay on these devices longer so that they can sneak in more ads. And that's where they make their money, which is fine. It's a
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
But so many of our youth, so many of our families have no idea that they're up against that algorithm. That's so good. So good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the first part. But the second part of this kind of drift is this concept of, when are we participating? And again, I'm not anti-technology. I'm not anti-social media. And I can't stress that a point. I think I lost that point. um, but it's when and how we participate. And the two times of day that I really want people to consider to reevaluate their approach to technology is at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. And if you think about it, that's the most vulnerable time from a neurological standpoint, from a energy level standpoint, from an impulsivity standpoint. So many of our youth say, I just logged on and I started down this rabbit hole, and all of a sudden here I am hours later drifting into all these different comments and subreddits and everything that all of a sudden the next, hours have gone by. And so one of the four kind of real impacts that technology has had that John Haidt really highlighted in his book was sleep deprivation, and how many of our youth are staying up online on their devices and not getting healthy, appropriate sleep to manage their next day.
Mm.
So when it comes to drifting, it leads to so many other parts of lack of self-care.
Yeah.
And then if you're starting the day, if you embrace the day, if you're not even getting out of bed and you grab your device and you start to scroll through or even just read work emails, when does the workday begin and when does the workday end is a question I ask myself every day. And to start to have healthier boundaries with our, communication of when stuff comes in and how am I ready to receive certain information? Am I ready to hear that? Or do I want to take a shower, have a routine, have a cup of coffee, do some mindfulness meditation in the morning time? And then after I'm centered, after I'm
Mm.
clear and
Yeah.
grounded, then I'm going to allow what device or what social media or what emails need to come through.
Yeah.
Sorry. Does that make sense?
No, totally.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
went on a little bit of
Yeah.
a
No,
tangent there
no, no,
myself.
no. So there's our understanding of the drifting, and one thing that you can do, which is to look at morning before bed.
Correct.
Yeah. What?
Actively
Yeah.
to really
So,
kind of really or as a family, as a connection, as a community, maybe having technology free nights or technology free times or technology free zones or technology free events. I was a big fan. We went to the 4th of July. We went with my family to go see the fireworks, and we all decided to leave the phones at home
yeah.
as opposed to being able to capture that perfect image, that
Yeah.
perfect spot. We all decided we were going to leave it all behind and just enjoy it and embrace it. And it's fireworks.
Yeah.
So
fireworks are here and then they're gone. You're probably not going to watch the video that you made.
No.
Anyway, yeah,
So,
exactly.
so technology-free times, technology-free
Yeah,
zones, technology-free parts of the day or family dinners. Parents, you can renegotiate your relationship with technology. Just because your kid has the device doesn't mean they can't renegotiate the relationship. It doesn't mean they can't have it at all, but have it at increments as opposed to without any, regulation. So,
yeah, yeah. So let's see. One thing I want to mention is that, our program, Learning Life Skills Together, not only talks about these skills, but talks about kind of situations or contexts in which you can really practice them and have a pleasant time and um, actually do yourself some good, both physically and mentally.
mm,
So we say things like go for a walk.
mm,
And so going out for a walk with your kids for 10 minutes up, 10 minutes back
mm,
down the street. It's easy enough to do, and you can do it regularly, and you could do it without your device. I
absolutely.
guess is what I want to is
Absolutely.
what I want to say. So
Yeah.
there's like this the easiest kind of thing, you know, just leave it at home, go out, come back, boom, you're done.
Yeah.
Or we talk about, you know, not just going into nature, but participating with beautiful artwork, whether it's looking at pictures or listening to music. If you're using your device to stream the music, I guess you're using a device, but you don't have to be doing anything else on it.
Sure, sure, sure.
And so it's like, are there things that we can do that, yeah, it's part of my life and this phone is part of my life. For instance, I think about my own experiences with birding. You know, if you're going birding, you need to be paying attention to what's going on around you and what's going on within you. You're listening, you're looking, all of your senses are
Mm,
active. To have that caught up in your device keeps you from really having that full experience,
mm.
right? The same thing with going fishing. If you're worried about your phone, you're going to miss a lot of fish.
Right, right.
Right. So in some sense, the activities that we're talking about, the things that we're encouraging people to do, kind of automatically reduce the use of our devices. And there's a
Truly.
lot of that in our lives, and there should be probably more
Correct.
of that in our
Correct.
lives.
Well, I'll say that with one caveat. That idea is that people aren't running around trying to capture whatever they're
Right,
participating
right,
in.
exactly.
Like we talked about Fourth of July, like how many people are going back to look at their videos from Fourth of July.
Right.
But we try to capture that perfect moment on this device versus wouldn't you rather be in the moment and be
Yeah.
present and be available for the nuance, the awkwardness, the subtlety.
Yeah. And the arm around your child while you're looking at the
Yes.
stuff happening in the sky
Yes.
rather than your arm up in the air
Right.
trying to capture.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, it's just there's no real sense of that's an equal trade-off.
Not at all. Not at
Yeah.
all. And again, like I don't mind technology. It's just this conversation didn't happen. And now we're going back and having these conversations appropriately as many times as we can so that we can have a healthier, balanced relationship. And you use the term practice. We're going to practice and we're going to make practice and we're going to stumble and we're going to have good days and bad days, but it's our abilities to keep at it and keep persistent in that
Yeah.
practice, I think is,
Yeah.
is another message I want to sneak in.
Yeah. Don't sneak it in. Just
Say
let's say
it.
it. Practice is important. Practice is what makes it happen in you as a whole person. We know a lot of stuff just in our mind,
Mm,
and we think we have it,
mm,
and then when we're under pressure, it's gone completely because it's only here. It's not here.
lived. Yeah.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
it's a if it's a lived response to the world,
Correct.
it's going to come out when we need it.
Correct.
That's what we're trying to offer our children,
Yes.
is that opportunity to have responses that are helpful, healthy, already built in.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you met me and you saw me present this to the school districts of Chester County, and I was grateful to have that opportunity. And I said it then, and I'll say it here, where I have an utmost respect for teachers and educators. My mom was for a lifetime, and I did part time. I taught here at the university in school social work, and I taught at Bryn Mawr in the school social work. And I say this with all respect, though, that parents who we're talking to, parents are 1,000 school teachers. In the respect that
Mm-hmm.
kids watch what you do and your own relationship with technology. And it is so vital for you as a parent to evaluate your own relationship with technology because your kids are watching what you do and the attachment styles. And I don't want your relationship with technology to interrupt your healthy attachment or interfere with those subtleties. Those nuances are so important for you to embrace and connect with your child, your family, your community. And so my hope, maybe my final message, I don't know where we're going with time, but is to make sure, again, this was my other kind of sneak in message, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
just saying
Yeah.
that, parents, you're 1,000 school teachers. So if you want your kids to have a healthier relationship with technology, maybe look at your own relationship with technology, if that's okay to
This
say.
is it. If that's what the kids see, mom,
Yes, yes.
and
They're and
just a minute.
right. And if the
Yeah.
kid sees the kid only sees you looking at your device, and it could be something really important, but the kid interprets whatever's on that device as more important than that moment. And that, death by 1,000 cuts and those emotional ties and those emotional relationships are so important when it comes to attachment structure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I have our fourth skill for you to have something to say about.
Great.
All right. And that last skill is effective communication.
Mm,
So really being able to say what it is that you're feeling and what it is that you need. I mean, we sort of scrape it all the way back. What's the most useful, the most effective communication with a little kid and with a big kid,
sure, sure,
is
sure,
to be
sure.
able to say, Mom, Dad, you know what I need right now?
Mm, mm,
Here's what's going on with me, and
mm,
here's what I think I need.
mm.
That wouldn't that make life easier?
Unbelievably so. But I'll tell you, my 5-year-old, to the teenagers I treat, to the young adults and adults, people don't ask for help in traditional ways. They
Yeah,
ask for help in side ways and some of their
yeah.
behaviors. So, please hear what I'm not saying and is such a vital thing. So when it comes to effective communication, I start with listening. And listening is such a vital piece. And listening to yourself, listening to your own temperature, your own tempo, where you are, and then listening to your loved ones and your community around to hear what they're saying, but also what they're not saying, in the respect of like what words are what parts of their stories, what parts of their narrative are they leaving out of fear or shame or what have
Mm.
you. And my favorite thing is when I talk about communication and effective communication, I talk about the Columbo method. I don't know if you ever remember the Columbo.
Oh, yes.
So it is
Perfect.
dated old one for some, but the idea is at the end of the show, this guy Columbo was a detective and he would have it all kind of figured out, but he didn't want to give it away. He wanted to ask the question and he posed his final kind of summation in questions. And that's what I call the Columbo method, where when I sit with a family, I come with curiosity. I come with not trying to tell a kid or tell somebody how to feel or what to think.
Yeah.
I tell a kid and I tell a family, ask questions, listen to their answers. And it's better to get a kid talking than to come with an agenda. And it's
Oh, yeah.
picking your battles and when and where and how you're going to have that communication. Some of our families think, oh, I got them locked in a car for the next half hour. Oh, I'm going to be able to talk to them. And that kid is thinking, oh, I can't wait to get out of this car because I feel so stressed. My mom's driving. Or the dad says, "Oh, I texted him. He said great," and we don't hear the tone, we don't hear the nuance, we don't
This is the
understand.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so technology can be a nice complement, a nice variance, but it can't take away from the awkwardness, the presence, the really being looking at that 87% of nonverbal cues.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And the eye contact,
yes,
which does not happen on devices. We
no,
fool ourselves. Those
yeah,
of us who use Zoom, we're like, oh, I'm with this person. It's like you are not.
no.
And you are not getting any oxytocin from
Looking
looking
at a
looking
screen.
at a screen.
Unfortunately, no, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah, so
no,
it's
but
not making you feel better.
no, but it's
Yeah.
important to kind of recognize though it can be a nice
Yeah.
compliment.
Yeah.
But to when we're talking to parents and being present and really effective communication in short lasts and short, and I say short because adolescents, young adults, they don't want to sit and have a 2 hour lecture. They don't want to have a
Mm-mm.
2 hour conversation, but a 5 minute conversation about something really meaningful. And then to be able to step back and say, okay, it looks like you're overwhelmed. So I'm going to leave you with this thought and I'll step away.
I want to come back to walking.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so if we're walking along together, we can look to the side, we can engage for 5 minutes, and then we can look at that bird over there.
Right.
We can
Right.
do all that. It's a way, unlike the car where
Sure.
we're locked in.
Yes.
And especially with teens who will say, okay, well,
I'm going to
let
turn
you
around.
go, Dad.
Yes.
I'm going back this way,
Yes.
which is fine. I
100%.
mean, it's that's a walk. It counts.
But it's also
If you
having
want to
that
think of it that way.
ability. Yeah. No, no,
Yeah.
no. But
Yeah.
that availability of freedom
Yes.
as that arm
Yes.
in arm along the road as opposed
Hmm.
to locking them into a
Yeah.
car.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree with that.
Yeah. So
That effective
awesome.
communication, did I get to that? Do you?
Yeah.
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 Okay. Good.
So we were talking about sort of the not necessarily positive side of our devices, but again, as we started, you were talking about the fact that, well, for some kids, who are really, really anxious, that communication being written,
Yes.
somehow gives enough distance to actually say something. And so there is value and validity in using these devices in that way. And
100%.
it's knowing your kid.
Yep. Yep. And not every
Yeah.
kid fits the same mold. So
Yeah.
it's just exactly knowing the
Yeah.
kid and knowing the setting and knowing what's
And
up.
and that's the
Yeah.
thing, you were saying, well, parents, you're 1,000 teachers. And what's neat is that they're not 1,000 second grade teachers. They're 1,000 teachers at each grade level. So
Sure.
they're the only ones who track the kid all the way through, have that whole, arc of development, right?
100%.
They see it,
100%.
they see it all, and they know what their own kids need. Yeah.
Absolutely. And when it comes to parents, I self-disclose sometimes with my families that I work with that I learned my dad was fairly successful in his own right, but I also learned from my father's mistakes. I learned from his stumbles. I learned from the way that he struggled because he shared with me about the struggle. So I
Mm,
didn't have to live up to perfection. And he
yeah.
shared with me the struggle so that I know I didn't have to be perfect. And then I saw him grow and develop in a different way. And so that really meant a lot to me that I found out my dad was human and my
Mm,
mom was human,
yeah.
as opposed to sometimes when kids just hear about the perfect image or see the perfect
Again,
life,
yeah.
then they're not really having
Uh,
that real connection.
Yeah, that's a really interesting driver, I think, in the whole life online is that we can smooth it out.
Sure. No
We
one's
can leave things out. Nobody's that smooth.
no, and no one's posting how they felt about themselves the next morning, or no one's posting
Yeah,
if they made a healthy decision. They're posting the perfect image of a party or, something else.
yeah,
So that's
yeah,
all.
absolutely. So we are coming up on our time here,
Sure.
and we have a tradition in our meetings of asking the guest for a word of wisdom or a watchword, if you will. So, what would you leave us with?
Intentionality. I think being intentional with your relationship
Mm.
with technology, being intentional with your relationships with your families, being intentional with who we are, how we present, I think is so vital.
Yeah, making choices.
Yes, being
Yeah,
proactive.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Perfect.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you so much,
Absolutely. I
Mike.
really enjoyed
Yeah,
joining. Thank you
I
so much
did
for the
too.
conversation.
All right.
Yeah.
And thanks everyone for listening.